Dr. Night Echoes. I was walking on a hidden path in the northwest woods when I saw a huge old tree in a flat area. Every single branch was covered in clothes. There were many items: socks for kids, fancy ties, white dresses, and old blue coats. They were not just tossed there. They were neatly fixed or tied to the wood. Some of the clothes looked very new, while others were just gray scraps falling apart in the damp air. As I got close, I saw the clothes were not empty. They were filled with dry grass and sticks to look like human bodies. It looked like a field of straw dolls hanging from the wood. I saw a tiny red shoe near the top and knew it was the same shoe I saw on a lost person sign at the start. My heart started to beat fast. I heard a soft, steady snip, snip, snip from the other side of the tree. I looked around and saw a lady sitting on the dirt with old cutting tools. She was carefully taking the buttons off a thick winter coat. She looked up at me, and her eyes were stitched shut with heavy, dark string. She smiled, showing teeth that were rubbed into sharp points. "Are you here for your fitting?" she asked in a voice that sounded like rocks rubbing together. She stood up, and I saw her own dress was made of people's hair. I did not speak. I turned and ran, the sound of her loud tools following me for a long way. I was sitting in a hunting seat in rural Alabama, about 20 feet up a tall tree. It was that blue time, just before the sun comes up, when all things look like dark shapes. I was looking through my heat camera at an open spot when I saw a warm shape come out from the woods. It was small, about the size of a young child, but it was moving on its hands and feet like a bug. It was very fast, jumping from tree to tree and then staying still for a long time. I moved the camera and looked with my own eyes. In the low light, the thing looked gray and had no hair. It did not have a face that I could see, just a smooth, round head. It stopped at the bottom of my tree and began to walk around it. I stayed very still, my breath stuck in my chest. Then, the thing began to go up. It did not use the branches. It just pushed its body against the bark and moved up like a snail. I could hear its skin pulling away from the tree goo with a wet, ripping sound. It stopped just 2 feet below my boots, its smooth head moving back to look up at me. I could see then that it had no eyes, only 2 deep, moving holes where a nose should be. It took a quick breath that smelled like wet metal and old meat. I did not think. I just kicked out with my heavy boot, hitting it right on the top of its head. It did not yell or fall. It just let go and drifted down to the ground like a piece of paper, landing with no noise. It looked up at me one last time, and then it ran into the dark on its back legs, its body growing long until it was nearly 7 feet tall. My friend and I had a habit when we stayed at my family's cabin. We would walk into the deep woods at night and try to find our way back using only the moon. We were about half a mile from any known path. We heard a soft, wet sound coming from the tall grass to our right. We turned on our very bright lights and looked at the area. At first, we saw nothing but the trunks of the trees. Then, the light hit the dirt. A woman was moving on her hands and feet through the mud. She was wearing a dark, flower print dress that was torn at the bottom and covered in dry dirt. She was not looking at us. She was looking at the ground, saying a string of silly words over and over. When the light hit her face, she did not blink or hide her eyes. She just stopped moving and slowly stood up, her bones clicking in the quiet. She looked at us and calmly said she was looking for her camp, but she had no bags, no shoes, and no light. We tried to be helpful, thinking she was a lost hiker in shock. We started walking her back toward the main camp area, but she kept stopping to touch the bark of certain trees and talk to them. At one point, I looked back and saw she was trying to step in our footprints, copying our walk exactly. When we reached the edge of the lit camp area, she did not thank us. She just turned around and ran back into the pitch-black woods with a speed that did not seem human. We told the park staff, but they never found any note of a woman like her staying there. I was playing a game in a far part of the Vermont woods when my map led me to a deep hole. Hanging from a big iron chain over a strong tree limb was a metal bell, about the size of a church bell. It was covered in green rust and strange, wavy writing that did not look like any words I knew. There was no part inside to ring it. I reached out and hit the side of it with a heavy stone, thinking I would hear a loud metal ring. Instead, there was total quiet. The stone hit the metal with a flat thud, but then a sound started to grow inside my own head. It was not a noise I heard with my ears. It was a shaking in my brain. It felt like a deep, sad ringing that moved with my heart. Every time the bell in my head rang, the world around me would change. The trees would for a moment turn into pools of white salt, and the sky would flash a bright, glowing red. I tried to move away, but my legs felt heavy, as if I were walking through thick syrup. I looked at the bell again and saw a face starting to form in the green rust. It was my own face, but it looked many years old, worn and cracked. The ringing in my head got louder until I fell to my knees, blood coming from my nose. I was able to crawl out of the hole, and as soon as I got over the hill, the shaking stopped. I looked back, and the bell was gone. There was only the iron chain, broken and glowing, white hot in the grass. I went to sleep in a small open spot near a lake, the only person for miles. When I opened my tent the next day, I thought I was very sick. Right across the open area, exactly 15 feet away, was a matching campsite. It was the same tent, the same type of stove, even the same half-eaten bag of dried meat sitting on the wood. It was a perfect copy of my setup, down to the way I had hung my wet socks over a certain branch to dry. I stood there, frozen, watching the other tent. The zipper began to move, sliding down slowly. A man stepped out and my heart nearly stopped. It was me. He was wearing the same soft shirt, the same dirty boots, and even had the same mark on his left face from a kid accident. He did not look shocked to see me. He just copied my moves perfectly. When I put my hand to my face, he did the same. When I took a step back, he took a step back. It was like looking into a big, very clear mirror in the middle of the woods. The fear hit when I noticed the one change. Behind him, in his part of the woods, the trees were all dead and black, and the sky was a dark, sickly purple. He smiled at me, and his teeth were not human. They were rows of thin, needle-like glass. He started to walk toward the middle of the area, and I saw he was trying to move over into my side. I did not pack. I did not even grab my boots. I ran toward the lake and swam to a small island, watching from the shore as I stood in my camp, slowly burning my gear and laughing with a sound that was not my own. I heard the crying around 4 p.m. It was a high, sad sound that seemed to be coming from a thick bush. "Mommy, I'm lost. It's dark," the voice cried. It sounded like a 5-year-old boy. I quickly left the path and pushed through the plants, calling out that I was coming to help. The crying would stop whenever I spoke, then start again from a few yards further in. I followed it for nearly 20 minutes, getting deeper into a part of the woods where the sun could not reach the floor. I finally broke into a small open area and saw the child. It was standing with its back to me, wearing a blue shirt and tan shorts. I started to move toward him, but then I noticed the size. The legs were 5 feet long, and the arms were tucked into the shirt sleeves, but they ended in hooves instead of hands. When the thing turned around, it did not have a face. It had a large, soft, speaker-like hole in the middle of its chest that was shaking with the sound of a child's cry. The eyes were on the ends of long, thin stems that poked out of the neck of the shirt. It was not a child. It was a hunter that had found a trap that worked on people. It had even dressed itself in old clothes it had found to look the part from afar away. The crying sound changed into a rough, clicking noise as it saw I was not falling for the trick. It jumped at me with a speed that did not match its clunky shape. I climbed up a steep bank and did not stop running until I reached the park office. We were camped 20 miles into a closed forest area, a place that takes a full day of hard walking to reach. At 3 a.m., the sound of voices woke me up. They were not soft or far away. They sounded like they were standing right in the middle of our camp. I looked out of the tent door and saw my friend in the next tent doing the same. He put a finger to his lips and pointed toward our cold fire spot. 4 adults, 3 men and 1 woman, were standing there in a half circle. They had no bags. They were just standing there in the dark, dressed in normal street clothes that were totally out of place for a 20-mile walk. They were not talking to each other anymore. They were just staring at our tents. After a few minutes of quiet, one of the men sat down on a log by the fire and asked, "Are you guys going to light this or what?" His voice was flat, with no feeling or warmth. My friend, who had a small axe close by, told them they needed to leave right now. The woman in the group moved her head and asked if we had any extra skin in a way that sounded like she was asking for a match. They did not fight when we told them to get out. They just stood up at once and walked back into the trees, moving with no noise at all despite the thick layer of dry leaves on the ground. We stayed awake with our knives out until the sun came up. In the morning, the only thing they left behind was a pile of small, complex dolls made of twisted human hair, sitting right where they had been standing. I was camping in the high mountains, miles from any other people. I am a heavy sleeper, but around 3 a.m. I woke up because I felt the top of my tent pushing down on my face. I thought the wind had broken the poles, but when I tried to push up, the cloth felt very heavy. It was like someone had placed a big, heavy weight right on top of the tent. I heard a soft, wet thump above me, followed by another. The tent cloth made a noise under the growing weight. I grabbed my light and opened the door, rolling out into the cold air. When I turned the light back onto my tent, I froze. Someone had been piling flat, heavy river stones on top of my tent. There were at least 20 stones, each the size of a dinner plate, piled in a perfect shape right over where my head had been. The creek where those stones came from was a long way away, down a deep hole. There was no way a person could have carried that many stones and piled them quietly in the dark. I looked at the woods with my light and saw a shape standing about 50 yards away. It was tall and thin, with arms that reached down past its knees. It was holding another heavy stone in its hands, frozen as it was walking toward me. It did not have a face, just a smooth, white area where a face should be. When the light hit it, the creature did not run. It just sat down and began to pile stones around its own feet. I did not wait to see how high it would build. I grabbed my keys and left the tent behind.